Hello, Peter4789 / Sirus here, and welcome to another rendition of Sirus Gaming Corner, a gaming podcast where I, Swordfish1390, and Force Reviews talk about various gaming topics. From old games to new games, everything is fair game as far as discussion goes. So how are you guys' evening going so far?
Yeah, doing well. Always glad to be back on after a little hiatus.
I'm living the dream. I am living the dream.
I believe you say that every time now. Sword.
I gotta come up with a new opening line.
Was the living the dream my usual line?
No, after.
You have a different line every time almost. I just repeat the same one.
Yeah, actually, yours is the same one. If we can have a blooper of just Schwartz saying the same thing in each episode, we could probably end up having a monorail. Here we go.
Anyway, this is take 2 for the episode we were working on, which was basically talking about the games we played last year. This is take 2 because the audio in that was kinda messed up and that was very echoey. So yeah. For today's episode, as I said before, we're basically going to be talking about the various games we've played throughout 2021.
Also, to clarify, it's like just any games that we played, not specifically 2021 games that came out. Yeah.
Yeah, because quite honestly, you can't just stick to just the same games that year because you can't afford every game, or there may be games you may have played from previous years. That typically is going to happen. So
I guess we should start about the games that we've played and beaten in 2021. Now, I'm going to do something different from our first take, and we're not going to talk about every game we played and beaten in 2021. Because I think that would be a very, very long episode if we did. But I still feel like to give a list of the games that I did play and beat, just to give an indication of what I did do that year in terms of gaming. So, for me personally, I played Persona 5 Strikers, Xenoblade 2, Xenoblade 2 Torna, Guilty Gear Strive, Multi-Blood Type Lumina, Scar Nexus, Tales of Arise, Last Judgment, and Nier Replicant. Those are the games that I've played and beaten to completion. But yeah. Oh wait, and Xenosaga 3. Yeah, I played Xenosaga 3 earlier in 2021 as well. Well, in the later date after, but yeah. How are you guys?
This is just going off the top of my head, but in terms of played and beaten, alright, this is kind of cheating a little bit, but like, I started Yakuza Like a Dragon at the last like December 30th or something like that. So I'm just gonna round up and say that 2021. So I beat that game, played almost all of it in 20. I played it all in 2021. Lost Judgment also. I beat that game. Tales of Arise, also same thing with Like a Dragon. Started it in 2020, but beat it in 2021. Those are the only ones that come to mind at the top of my head, but I know I'm gonna think of more later on. But that's just going off my memory.
I'm more obviously. If any of you guys follow me on Twitter, I'm sure there's a couple of people might watch Peter's videos here. I collect a lot of games, but specifically the games that I got and beat it last year. I actually had a chance to finish the PS5 version of Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. Had an opportunity to beat Sakura Wars. Phenomenal game. Had the opportunity to beat Guardians of the Galaxy. That was quite a superb game and honestly underrated game of last year. Games I haven't actually had a chance to finish. So I obviously played Melty Blood, did a couple of the rounds of Melty Blood because I actually got the import of it and didn't quite finish that. Got Grand Theft Auto the trilogy, absolutely hated it. It runs pretty poorly, so I may not go back to that because the game is a pile of rubbish. The Ninja Gaiden Master Collection, I beat the first Ninja Gaiden. It's a really good collection that I imported in physical English. A physical copy in English, and that's actually a really good, high quality port of that game. Persona 5 Strikers, I got as well. That was surprisingly for a Dynasty Warriors game. That was good. I wanted something different. The sequel plays nothing like the original Persona 5. Other games that I actually had a chance to dabble in was I played a little bit of Root Film, Shin Megami Tensei 3, as well as Shadowverse, Champions Battle. That is a card game based off of a anime. And the last game that I had a privilege to play before we started doing our recording was a game called Max: The Curse of Brotherhood. Apologies about my phone, guys. I'm sorry. That's actually a really good platformer. But we'll talk more about that later. That's what I played. There's obviously tons of other games I got, like the Soul Nomad and Phantom Brave collection that came out last year. So that's all I got to say. Oh yeah, Shin Megami Tensei 5. I started playing that as well. Didn't finish that yet, but that'll be something I get to next.
I got the
started
game.
that too.
I got the game, but I haven't started it yet.
Yeah, I had it basically started it, but never got a chance to actually get around to playing. I got probably a little bit into the introduction past that. It's a really good game. It's very difficult though, but it's a hell of a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think I played it for about 15 hours so far. I'm enjoying it.
You haven't played through Nier Replicant yet, Sword?
I played, I want to say like 80% of it, the first playthrough, and I think something else came out around the time when I was playing it, and I jumped into that, and then I put it on hiatus and just haven't had a chance to go back to it yet. But I did play like the majority of it though, so to get a good idea of what it's like.
Okay. So I guess the first game I want to talk about is Nier Replicant. Nier Replicant is basically a remake of the original Nier, kind of. Sort of.
Yeah, it's like an enhanced. It's almost more like an enhanced port. Like it definitely. It's a graphical upgrade for sure, and it does smooth out the combat a bit. But it's not like a massive step forward to the point where I wouldn't call it like a full-fledged remake per se. I guess you could kind of say it's kind of like the Persona 4 Golden or the Persona 5 Royal of the original Nier. That's kind of like the way I would.
Yeah, enhanced port.
Yeah.
Like,
but I feel like one of the biggest draws of the game is that you're now playing as Brother Nier instead of Father Nier, because we didn't see that in the West.
That's mostly for people who played the game in the West. And
like for us, it's new.
Because like we said this in our Nier episode before, but the main difference between the localized version of Nier and the Japanese version of Nier is that they made a different protagonist, sort of, for the versions. Now they're not totally different. It's just basically one's older and has a different dynamic with Yona, but the dialogue is essentially the same.
Mm-hmm. And that's also kind of the funny part, is you can tell some of the differences when you play the Gestalt version that we got initially, how certain lines by Father Nier just sound kind of goofy.
Yeah. But now we get to experience the game how it was originally played in Japan, I guess.
Yeah, we kind of got like the most authentic version.
I don't remember. Was all the dialogue, the side quest dialogue, voiced in the version of Nier?
Actually, it wasn't.
Yeah.
It was all text. So like Nier Replicant is, I think, like pretty much 100% voiced.
Yeah.
Even if you're not doing a side quest, if you just talk to some NPC that doesn't give you a side quest, they're still voiced, which is like pretty incredible.
Yeah. It's like the game's fully voiced. The combat system is modified and changed to a good degree that it doesn't like change the whole mechanics, but it's a lot more fluid. The Gar pairing has much more higher returns and it's much more worth it. Everything that made combat enjoyable in the original Nier is amplified in Nier Replicant. Of course, all the broken parts of Nier, the original Nier, is still in Nier Replicant. Like lances. Lances are still broken in this game.
Like spear. Still OP as hell.
Yeah. I have a special connection to playing Nier Replicant, mostly because if you follow me on Twitter throughout this year, 2021, I got pretty sick with COVID and had to be hospitalized. And the game I played when I was still recovering from COVID at home was Nier Replicant. So yeah, the Nier Replicant does have a pretty special place in my heart in terms of games I played in 2021. Even before that, I still really like the original Nier. And I feel like Nier Replicant is just a better version of Nier.
Yeah, it's the definitive version. It's pretty much the Nier that we've wanted from the beginning, honestly.
Like we said, the combat's better. Graphically, it's not. It is better, but it's not like too.
It's not pushing the limits of the PS4. That's for sure.
Yeah. Music. This is where you can get a bit iffy on which is better, because like, for some reason, Nier Replicant doesn't have an option for you to choose the original soundtrack that the original Nier had. Nier Replicant has remixes of all the songs we've heard the original, but not like the actual original, except for some instances. And I feel like
bizarre.
And I feel like most of the songs in the remake are really good, but not as good as the original.
Yeah, like I've actually, just for like kind of for fun, I've done side by side comparisons for some of the songs between the two, and for the most part, I do prefer the original soundtrack. And like, it's not just a nostalgia thing either. Like, I just legitimately don't think that the Replicant soundtrack is as good, even though on its own it's still really, really great. But I would, if I had to choose, if I had the option in the game, I would have switched to the original soundtrack at some point.
But yeah, overall, if you like the original Nier, you're going to like Nier Replicant if you haven't played it yet. Which I'm assuming that people who have played original Nier have really played and bought original Nier Replicant. For most people at least.
There might even be people who started with Nier Automata and are only just getting Replicant now, and they can kind of see where it started too. So
I'm one of the minorities who owns both games and I haven't opened either one of them. So yeah.
But it's funny you should mention Persona 3 and 4 and 5, the extended ports, because like those games, this has an extended story segment added to it in two forms.
That's true.
Firstly, there's a extra chapter in the game in between, like it happens like in between the time skip and the ending. But well, I guess the main plot of the extra story starts at that point, but it's introduced much earlier, like how Marie was introduced much earlier in Persona 4 Golden, or like how Kasumi was in Persona 5 Royal. Mostly it's like this story revolving around this shade that's residing in this ship, and then you see a rather heartbreaking, interesting story revolving around the shade wanting to be human and not shade because of this interaction she has with this person in the sea town. And it's kind of really heart-wrenching too. And it feels very in line with the original Nier. That it feels like a perfect story to include. And then
Nier is a game full of Nier is a game full of heartbreak in general, so that's pretty fitting.
And then you have an extra ending. And I feel like here you can feel the Automata vibes going into Nier Replicant. Because there's like a lot of Automata like stuff in it. I don't know if this is spoiling much, but you know how I said before it'd be cool you can play as Kane in the original Nier? Well, when you're going for this other ending, you get to play as Kane, and it's really cool.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Nice.
Yep. Now, one of the negatives I feel is that you can only play as Kane in this bit, in the extra ending, and it's not like there's much stuff to do in the extra ending, in extra route, just because it's just mostly main story. You don't get any side quests, you don't get any arena stuff you can play with Kane. It's basically just go through the story playing as Kane. But I do feel like the the extra route does, if you can believe it, give more highlights to Kaine too, as well. In terms of living in a world without Nier, or main protagonist, as Yokotaro apparently don't like people calling the main protagonist Nier for some reason. I don't know.
That's weird. Kind of hard. It's like, what do you call him? Main character?
Yeah. Main protagonist.
I guess so.
But yeah, overall, I think Nier Replicant is really good overall. Like, oh yeah, and Nier Replicant has a much stable frame rate than the original Nier.
Yeah, the original did not run great.
But all the strong points that made the original Nier good, it also has its weak points too, like the side quest.
I was about to mention they're terrible.
Yeah. Like the stories,
they're like some of the worst side quests I've ever seen.
Like the story building in the side quest isn't bad, but it's just like the actual task you do is kind of boring at times.
But what's a shame too is that once in a very blue moon, you do have a nice, meaningful side quest, like story-wise. Like one of my favorites is with the old man and the dog. Like that was very like heartbreaking. And you don't even really do anything. You just go to the field, find the dog, and come back, and then that's it. That's the side quest. You could do it in like 5 minutes, but it's like those 5 minutes are like really nice and poignant. But it's sad that quests like that are the exception than the rule.
I would say doing side quests is better in Nier Replicant just because they're voiced.
Yeah, adds a little more personality.
So that'll get you into the experience more. But side quests themselves isn't too hot, still.
And what sucks too is that it's like the best way to make money too. So you almost feel obligated to do them.
But yeah, I think that's all I have about Nier Replicant. Overall, I really liked it. I think it's one of the best games I played in 2021. You want to add anything more to it, Sword?
Not really. I mean, yeah, I think we said pretty much everything that needs to be said. It's got a lot of the same chinks in the armor that the original Nier does, but even that even the things that it still the problems that it still maintains feel more polished by comparison. But it's definitely not like a humongous overhaul like maybe some people were expecting, but it is a more polished, more refined experience over the original, and I think that Nier Replicant is definitely now the definitive way to play Nier. So if you haven't played the Nier like at all, period, and you want to start, then get Replicant over like the original version.
Any games you want to talk about, Sword? That made a highlight?
I guess we could talk about Yakuza Like a Dragon, because like I said, I technically started it at the end of 2020, but again, that was the last like couple days, so the vast majority of the experience was in 2021, so I still count on it.
Did you play through Like a Dragon, Forrest? Forrest?
Oh my bad. Actually, I played it a bit. I actually did not get a chance to actually beat the game, unfortunately.
Okay.
But I played it enough to know the intro and after the fact. So I up to a point, I do know the premise of the game, so I'm not too lost of it.
Okay. So, what do you think of Lost Judgment, Sword?
Lost Judgment?
Wait. I mean, Like a Dragon. I got mixed up. Like a Dragon, like a dragon.
Oh wait, that was quick.
That's a totally different game there, wasn't it?
Yeah, because I Like a Dragon.
Like a Dragon, I absolutely loved. I definitely rank it somewhere like in my top 3 Yakuza games. If we're not including the Judgment games, because they are spin-offs, I'd say that Like a Dragon probably ranks in my 3rd place behind Zero and Kiwami 2, respectively. Mm-hmm. And I think that Like a Dragon is a really like great new beginning, because I like how the intro of the story does parallel Kiryu's story in the first Yakuza game, but it doesn't feel like it was copied and pasted either. It still feels like it has like its own identity. It doesn't just feel like they're rehashing. It's more like it's
There's
Ichiban's...
like a lot of parallels between Ichiban and Kiryu in some ways.
It still manages to like feel like its own thing too, without just feeling like they decided to copy and
Like
paste.
there's
it.
a lot of there's a lot of parallels to Kiryu, but they're also to highlight how different Kiryu is to Ichiban. I feel when you do see those parallels,
because even that, like, they still do have like pretty vastly different like backstories too, and their personalities are vastly different. And I just think that Ichiban himself is a very endearing and relatable character, and I just love his outlook on life, basically, and how he views everything in the lens like he's actually like as an RPG, which is a funny justification for why the game has turn-based combat to begin with, because Ichiban literally...
I feel like Ichiban is the epitome of the
like lovable idiot.
Yeah, lovable idiot. That's the phrase.
He's very sincere, very kind, but he's also a dumbass at the same time. That's also exactly what makes him so entertaining. But what I like though is that they don't take it too far and make him like a total like idiot and incompetent and a buffoon. Like when the story is like really like taking itself super seriously, Ichiban follows suit. Like it's not like just played for laughs most of the time. Like Ichiban still feels like he's a well-rounded character. He's not just entertaining, he's also like a sincere character too, and that's why he ranks like in one of my favorite like main characters for a game in a long time. And I also think that the overarching story of Like a Dragon is also really great, and it's got a lot of intrigue, and there's a lot of really cool twists and turns and reveals. And I definitely think that it has in my opinion, Like a Dragon has the single best like ending in the entire Yakuza franchise that I've played personally. I think it's so emotional and poignant, and it almost brought a tear to my eye. It was such a powerful and emotional ending to Ichiban's like first outing in this in the series. And lastly, the combat, I like that they wanted to try a different approach, because we've only ever had beat 'em up combat systems, and I think it works well enough. But I think that the combat, in my opinion at least, is the weakest part of this game, and I think there is definitely room for improvement. Because certain things feel wildly unpolished.
What you mean? It's not the greatest thing ever just because it has a turn-based combat system?
I mean, obviously it's for cultured people.
Yeah, you know what's
it's only good when it's turn-based, man.
You know what's the funniest thing that I heard about the combat system?
It's like Persona 5.
It's like Persona.
Okay, you look at screenshots, and yes, the UI is almost identical, like to a T.
But like, if you played the game for at least an hour or so, you can totally see that people making that comparisons are just making it a skin deep comparison. Because
they're just going by what they see.
Hold on. The game is not even that fast compared to Persona 5. You can't even compare it, even just strictly off of how Yakuza plays compared to Persona is night and day. It's not even the same. It's just there's nowhere close, because when you think Persona 5, you know what I mean? It's so flashy and everything's fast paced and everything's moving quickly. There's a rhythm to Persona 5's battle system, right? Not just because of the music, but just because of the way the game is made. Everything just flows. Nothing against Yakuza's battle system, but it feels more like an old school turn-based, very, you know what I mean, like slower paced game compared to Persona 5's more actiony feel. Not in the sense that the game is actiony, but just like the way how it plays, it just feels smooth.
Well, just mechanically, Like a Dragon doesn't have anything that resembles Persona 5. So
like Persona 5, Persona 3, 4, and 5 entire combat system revolves around hitting weaknesses and having a one more turn system, and being able to knock every enemy down so you can basically kill them in one strike with an auto attack. And a lot of the strategy revolving around the game is basically not to make the enemy have a turn for most of it. And for boss battles, it's just a war attrition, buffing and then attacking. but that is the core principle of the Persona 3 to 5 combat system. It's around hitting weaknesses and having a system that put more emphasis on it. In Yakuza Like a Dragon, there is no extra mechanical emphasis on hitting weaknesses in that game. I mean, yeah, enemies do have weaknesses, and they do get, if you hit them with their weaknesses, they do get damage more.
Yeah, like it's beneficial to you to do it.
Yeah, but there's no mechanical complexity to hitting weaknesses in the game.
Well, not going into too much of this, but I do think that the difference between these two games is that Yakuza Like a Dragon is more like a jack of all trades because of the fact that it's trying to portray a sense of all culture type of games, in its style. And its combat, it reflects that. So
I think it's more that Yakuza Like a Dragon is trying to simulate old school type of turn-based combat system like Dragon Quest,
right?
And it's a jack of all trades.
Well, no, what I mean by jack of all trades is that it's exactly what it is. Not just trying to be one type of battle system, but trying to be a lot of everything. I think the reason people feel that it sort of feels similar to Persona, not even so much that it's combat, because it's Sega and it's Atlas. They're both the same company now. So when you think Sega, you think Atlas. And essentially, because they're tied to the same company now, they're no longer separate. You think, oh, okay, well, I can see a resemblance of Persona. Because unfortunately, that's how people portray Sega now. When they think Atlas, they think Sega. So obviously, they're one family. And that's just how it is. So I mean, technically they work together now. You never know. There could be some people from the Atlas staff who helped them work on that game. It's a possibility. We just don't know. But what I can say, just strictly off of playing it, I do not see much of a resemblance to Persona 5 in any way. And if there is, it's hard to justify that it's similar.
With that said, even though we're saying it's not like Persona 3, 4, 5 combat style, I'm not saying that the combat is bad.
No, it's not bad. No.
Like a Dragon. There's still a lot of things to enjoy in the combat system. For one, the special attacks are very satisfying to pull off of how over the top and flashy they are. Especially using the various skills that gives you a special animation, especially the higher tier skills, especially the summons. The summons are really, really cool in this game, and it's really
so entertaining.
It's really creative how they justify, I guess, the RPG mechanics into the combat system.
It's just good fun, man. Like, yeah. I mean, the fact that they use spells, like using a ball of alcohol and, like, you know what I mean, like spitting out alcohol and using a lighter to make flames, like a magic wizard. I mean, taking realistic things and making it feel like you're playing in a RPG.
Yeah.
You know what this game reminds me of? For a brief moment, it reminds me of South Park: The Stick of Truth. Where literally they're like fantasizing this world of like being in an RPG, It sort of kind of gives me that impression.
But yeah, I think the game does a really good job of integrating real life concepts and RPGifying them in some regards.
That's exactly what this game does really well. Like, they try to understand that, hey, in reality, this isn't possible. But at the same time, it's a video game, so it's possible.
And so I like how they justify how it's a turn-based combat system and how you have all these unique enemies is like hallucinating it somewhat because he has a wild imagination and they just run with that.
Yeah, and I think that's really the moral of it all is the fact that you can appreciate for something that's different from the series entirely. And this is just something. This is, again, coming from me who has not beaten the game, who has played it enough to understand the quirkiness of the game. Like, it is definitely a game that you will easily sink your teeth into the entire time. There's just so much to do, not only from a gameplay standpoint, you get the traditional stuff you get to explore in the previous Yakuza games. Like that's pretty much similar, but the stuff they added in to make this feel more like an homage to video games out there, it's quite obvious. Obviously, it's done really well. Like there is no game I can think of right now that even gets close to the amount of video game callbacks that it does. From what just a few hours I played of it, just seeing how even the sound effects remind you of old Genesis, Super Nintendo, or even 8-bit games. It's just cool. Like the polish to the actual game overall of what I played is by far none. That's something that Sega does really well, and that's something that Atlas does well. That is one thing you can give a compliment to, is that these two games are just polished to a T in the way that they're built. I think that's something that a lot of people appreciate with the series, and I think that's one of the reasons why people compare it to Persona. I mean, we can agree to that it's polished. That's one thing I can say. So,
I gave some good points about how the game does a really good job of RPGifying real life concepts into the game to make it make sort of more sense. Why you're seeing this combat system through the eyes of Kasuga in the game. But then there are some bad points to it too. More like the job center. I hate the job center.
Oh, you can literally only change your classes in one location, which is so annoying.
Herder, you want to change the job? Go to the job center, man.
But aren't we clever? Don't you get it? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Wait, you gotta go to where?
Like there's only one job center in the entire city.
Instead of being able to change them on the fly.
Yeah.
So they couldn't pull a Final Fantasy where you can change your job class, but you gotta go to one place.
I mean, there are various job classes, and they're all pretty cool. The problem is twofold. One, you can only change at a job center. And two, when you do change to a new class that you haven't used before, you have to grind a shit ton on it just to make it usable. Because like have job levels. But rather than
and then all your stats go to shit, and then you're back, you're starting from scratch.
Wait, didn't a Final Fantasy game do that in the earlier Final Fantasy days? Was it Final Fantasy 2? One of them you had to like set up individually each class. I'm not talking about 14. I'm talking about
like 3
older,
or 5 maybe.
Yeah, older Final Fantasies where you had to level up each individual class. That sounds pretty frustrating, honestly.
And then and the other thing too is, even with that being said, I feel like you can get by with most of your characters just default classes. Like I didn't really feel like there was too much incentive to go experiment with others. Like I changed a couple and I was happy with them, but like once you pick a class that you like and beef it up, you're gonna get through the game just fine.
Okay, so
like I changed Ichiban to the Breaker class when it became available, and I just did that the whole game, and I never changed back.
Okay, so here's my question then, just out of curiosity. I know you guys have played and I haven't, so I'm kind of speaking in a general sense for everybody who's watching. But do you think it warrants a replay to experience different job classes, or
Maybe.
are all job classes similar to where if one character's that job class, will that character play the same way, or do they have their own special? Like, let's say you use magic, or I don't know, just
they have different stats. They have different stat spreads, if that's what you're talking about, and that makes them better than other in certain jobs.
So basically,
but, like,
not
otherwise, like the movesets and the animations are like exactly the same between the characters.
So they are exactly the same.
Yeah, in terms of like the fighting styles, like for example, if you make Ichiban and Adachi breakers, they have exactly everything, all their stances and movements and attack animations, everything's exactly the same.
That's what I was wondering. So it's like Final Fantasy 13, where you get to the end of the game and everybody can basically be exactly the same. There's no
Yeah, but
coherent.
it's some me I can't believe I'm actually giving this game credit, but it's like in Final Fantasy 10 2, where even though the three characters can use the same classes, they have completely different like fighting, like at least animations. Everything like it's different between the three characters. Like if you have all of them are warriors, then they look and fight completely differently, despite being
Like,
the same class.
Like in
Hold on,
Final
hold on,
Fantasy
hold on, hold on.
X2, in Final Fantasy X2, like they did a really good job of making each character have their own distinct aesthetic, even though they're in the same class. Like in the
Yeah.
warrior one, they have like Y is like the same type of outfit. It's still pretty different, and the sword they use is pretty different. With Yuna using Brotherhood, Riku, I can't remember, and then Pain just using her default sword because she's a default warrior in the game.
Right.
I cannot believe, for the first time since I've known these guys, they actually gave Tentu a compliment.
I like
Just
Tentu.
know that.
Don't
Just
get
know-
used to it.
Just know though that don't expect it to happen very often.
I like Tentu in terms of the combat system,
Moving on.
but yeah. Another thing about Like a Dragon that I'm kind of disappointed in terms of its combat system. And I said this in my Yakuza video that I released way back earlier in the 2021. Is that I'm disappointed that Yakuza Like a Dragon didn't emphasize more use of the environment in the game. Because I think I feel like most of the mainline Yakuza games does a really good job of emphasizing the environment through the real-time action combat system. Whether that be through heat actions, picking up enemies, drop tools if you hit them well enough, and stuff like that. And I feel like Yakuza Like a Dragon doesn't really have that environmental interaction, which I think feels pretty much a shame. Like the only environmental interaction you have in the combat system in this game is character picking up like items on the floor,
Like a bike or something.
and that's not something you control. They just do it randomly. If they sometimes if they're like AI moves them nearby.
It's basically like situational. Like if you run up to an enemy to normal attack them, and there just happens to be like a cone or a bike next to you
Yeah.
or something like that, then they'll do it. But otherwise, you have no like say in it.
And I
which is
feel
lame.
like it's so odd how there's no movement system in this game, because you do see the characters actually moving throughout the battle, but it's like
it's random. They just
Yeah.
move out on their own.
yeah.
Well, I hope hope you guys realize that if they make a sequel, that problem will be addressed.
And even worse is there's no enemy list when you're targeting.
Oh yeah.
Oh my
Enemy
god, that
list.
frustrated me so much.
This is especially egregious because there's a mechanic in the game where you get more damage if you hit a down enemy in time. But sometimes you don't
Yeah.
hit them on time because you're trying to click on them, but there's no really precise way to do it. And you know what's the precise way to select what enemy you want to hit? An enemy
So
list!
basically, so they don't. So you mean to tell me the one thing that should be a commonplace option is a enemy list? Like older games had enemy lists.
Yeah, Final Fantasy
And
X.
Final Fantasy 8 and 9 had enemy lists.
But like this is like sort of, this is turn-based, but there's like real-time mechanics added to it in terms of timing. There's like a timing-based mechanic in it, which is mostly how you get extra damage if you hit an enemy who's already downed, and you hit attack on them before they get up. Which is like, it's a mechanic you see in the Yakuza games, in the real-time combat system, though it works in that game because it's real-time combat system, and you have free control of how to move the character. But in this game, there's not as much precise control compared to the real-time combat system, as strange as that sounds, in terms of talking in terms of a real-time combat system compared to a turn-based combat system.
Yeah, the two just don't mix together for certain aspects.
Yeah. Like there are some elements that works, like there are various skills that use the Yakuza QTEs, which does give it that extra oomph in terms of like executing them, and does give that Yakuza vibe to it. But just there are other mechanics that just feel out of place.
At the end of the day, I forgive some of its flaws from what you guys are saying, just because it's the first of its kind in the series. So I think with more time for them to make newer games, I think that stuff could end up being fixed or even evolved into something that makes the game series more, I guess, gives it more of an identity.
Though at the end of the day, I will say that Yakuza 7, despite having a different combat system than all the other mainline Yakuza games, it is still at its heart a Yakuza game.
Yeah, it has everything. Like the city feels alive. You got all of the sub stories. Most of them are very wacky. Some of them very touching, and lots of mini games. It has every single aspect that you would want in a Yakuza game.
Yeah.
Like despite the turn-based combat, it's very recognizable as a Yakuza game, which I love.
And I would say that I think Yakuza 7 has the strongest a variety of minigames in the mainline games so far that I've played, which is all of them currently. Like, I think the matchmaking game is pretty interesting to play, and it's really rewarding since you get optional character you can play through. Like, this is an actual character that you only interact once, and they don't interact in the story, but you can bring them along. And I think the racing minigame is pretty cool. The trash collecting minigame is also cool in a Pac-Man like of game, sort of. And yeah, I just think the minigames are really, really fun in Yakuza Like a Dragon.
Yeah, like despite all the complaints that we may have had with the combat, it's still serviceable. But I think everything surrounding the combat is so strong, and makes it one of the best in the series. Like whether it be Ijin Show itself with the new city, all the mini games like we talked about, and again the story and characters are really great and also some of the best. But like, yeah.
Speaking of characters, I think Yakuza Like a Dragon is the first time they integrate a party system into the game. I think it works relatively well.
Yeah, because they had to accommodate for the turn-based system that they were going for. And I do like all these characters, but what some I don't like is the vast majority of the game you have only 4 characters. And
I will I will say that this is pretty much Ichiban's story.
Yeah.
Like all the other characters they're significant, but you can pretty much tell this is pretty much a story revolving around Ichiban's journey of him taking the fall for his family, of why he was shot by another main character that he trusted, about why he was ditching Ijincho, of him discovering the secrets between the 3 major powers in Ijincho, and how that ties to the Tojo and Omi. And this is, and as strange as it sounds, this is pretty much like the final chapter of the Tojo clan.
Yeah, without giving away any spoilers, there is a major event that happens later in the game that's going to change how the rest of the series is going to go.
Yeah. This is like Yakuza 6 was Kiryu's finale, and you would think that would be the end of the Tojo saga too, but no, this is the actual Tojo conclusion to the Tojo clan.
Because Yakuza 6 was specifically the end of Kiryu's story, not the Tojo clan or the overarching story around him.
But what I will say that all the other characters do feel are really still pretty good characters. But I will say that the game does focus on mainly 4: Ichiban, Danba, and then skip a step is Saiko and then Adachi. And then skip a step further then it's the rest of the characters.
Yeah, they're kind of spoilery, so I don't want to
Like-
name them here.
Yeah. Especially one of them.
Yeah, like, it's the thing is those last two characters. I like them a lot, and I do think they're interesting on their own. But they come so late into the game that the chemistry between the initial four is already so established that throwing in more feels kind of like it just throws a monkey wrench into the whole thing. And on top of that, there's also a lot of times where those other two characters are just inexplicably absent in very key cutscenes
It's
for
like
no reason. Like
the main point of them is mostly their influence rather than their character roles within the dynamic in the story.
yeah. Like, not saying that they don't have any role whatsoever,
Yeah.
but it's definitely minimal compared to the initial four.
Yeah.
So I feel like if there was a way to integrate them into the party earlier and give them more agency, it would have been a lot better. But like I said, on their own, they're good characters.
And
I still like them.
I think the game does still do a pretty good job of highlighting each character's personality and many story arcs, because there is a story revolving around them if you do the, let's be honest, social links for each of the characters.
Let's just call it what it is.
Yeah. Because that comparison to Persona, I can't understand.
Yeah, that I get.
Yeah.
And every character does have a pretty a nice little self-contained story. I think
Yeah.
my favorite one was probably Adachi's. I really liked his little social link.
Yeah.
And you also get nice little bonuses from doing them. Like every time you get a level up in your social link, they can access either a new job class or have little buffs and things like that. So it's nice.
And I do think the game does a pretty good job of having these nice interactions that happen if you traverse to certain parts of the city or eat at a restaurant and eating certain type of foods. That's I think that's a pretty
they're
nice.
they're basically skits. They're basically skits in a Tales game.
They're not
But
they're not as in depth as a skit system, I feel, but they're still pretty nice interactions.
Yeah, they're entertaining. But I don't like how they're like in real time and how like if you got like a mob of enemies walking at you, that'll cancel out the skit altogether, and then you got to do the battle and then start it all over. So now at least you don't miss it permanently. At least you can still go to it. But there's times where I'm trying to listen to a skit and I'm like, I got mobs of enemies coming to me two ways, and I'm more focused on trying to avoid them than I am listening to the skit. So I think that if there's a way to like kind of portray them maybe similar to a Tales game, where at least have the game pause in some way to have the interaction happen, as opposed to having it happen in real time. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but
I do find it weird how the Yakuza games doesn't really have a reliable way to avoid enemies. With the only game doing that is like Yakuza 0. In terms of throwing money to distract them.
Something like that. Yeah, because I remember that in Zero. That's a good way to avoid enemies, but otherwise,
Because most of the other
general-
Yakuza games, you can't really avoid them, except like just taking another street, like making a big detour.
But I think that's pretty much all there is to say about Like a Dragon, really.
Is there a game you want to talk about that you played through 2021 for us?
Yeah, so I'll try to be brief on this because I know this is probably the only game I played that you guys haven't played yet. So I had a privilege and the opportunity to finish Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. A really good game. Not the longest game in the series, but definitely one of the better Ratchet and Clank games. The story basically takes Ratchet and Clank into a new dimension. Think of it like an alternate universe of their own galaxy. It's pretty cool that they went this route. It would have been nice to change up the story entirely, but the formula a bit. But they did a good job of actually doing a what if scenario with a what if dimensional sort of idea that utilized characters similar of Ratchet and Clank, but obviously not Ratchet and Clank. Merged this universe together to create probably one of the better stories of the modern Ratchet and Clank games. And I think this is probably one of the reasons why I'm sort of mixed on the game, but this is only because I think had it had a little more polish in terms uh, in terms of how it's made, I think it would probably be even better game. I know I'm being vague on this because I'm trying to actually think what I overall thought of the game as a first time playing it. I recall playing it for the first time, being that it's a next generation game, being blown away by the graphics. The engine they use for the fur on the characters of Rivet and Ratchet are bar none some of the best detail for fur animations for characters done in this series so far. It is it's pretty good, and every detail in the environments are up to the standard of what next generation games are capable of being. And that's something that you really cannot take away from this game. It's really good. The combat is what you expect from any of the Ratchet games you've played before. However, the weapon choices are a bit lacking compared to, say, Into the Nexus or Crack in Time or even the 2016 Ratchet and Clank. I think they took some of the better weapons and choices from those games and added them into this game and done a great job of choosing some of the best weapons. But there are still a lot of weapons that they could have chosen, but they did not. And while that doesn't affect the game in any way, because the weapons are quite good, there are some, of course, unique weapons specific to this game. Like there's a specific weapon that you can obtain that really isn't a weapon, but it's a callback to all of the franchise's other games. You can actually summon other unique vehicles and characters from other games by collecting this specific weapon that you have to do certain trials to unlock. You have to collect all the collectibles to do it though. But this weapon allows you to summon um, the van from Sly Cooper, or you can summon Jack and Daxter. Jack and Daxter actually appears in the world of Rift Apart. It's pretty cool. It's a cool weapon. It's not really a weapon you can use to attack people, but imagine summoning all of the first party games from Sony into the Ratchet and Clank universe. That is essentially what this is. Even Uncharted even pops up in Ratchet and Clank. So it's pretty cool to see a weapon that can do that sort of thing. However, that's essentially where my sort of mixed reaction to the game starts falling in. Is right halfway through the game, you start to feel that the game's sort of rift mechanic. That's sort of the staple of the name of the game, where you're essentially rifting through dimensional areas of other planets within Rivet's galaxy, traversing through places that you shouldn't normally be able to go. And it starts to get a little bit underwhelming and repetitive towards the end of the game, because by the end of the game you're starting to use the rift mechanic a lot more, to the point that it starts to get sort of monotonous and you start getting tired of doing it, because there are boss fights that force you to have to use the rift mechanic to defeat them. It's not annoying that you have to do it. I think it's just sort of the fact that you've seen it and you're ready to kind of move on from it. Um, but does that mean the game is bad? No, it's not. And I think that if you take it for what it is, and you take it for the fact that it's sort of reinventing the series in its own way, it's not a bad thing at all. I think for the first playthrough you will have with this game, you will absolutely love it for what it is. But I think the highlight of the game for me was the antagonist that they introduced for Rivet's universe, and that is actually Emperor Nefarious. So as we all know, Dr. Nefarious has been the antagonist of all the games since pretty much from the beginning, essentially. Um, Trying to stop Ratchet in every way sense of the word, but failing aimlessly at it, never succeeding. Emperor Nefarious is what Dr. Nefarious wants to be. He wants to be the ruler of the galaxy, the guy that claimed every planet and has a ruler of everything. And Emperor Nefarious, in the universe that Rivet's from, does accomplish that. And ironically enough, Rivet is the opposite of Ratchet, where she's never accomplished ever defeating Emperor Nefarious. So imagine this sort of character that is so evil and so you can just tell that he's more serious than Dr. Nefarious is. Like, the way the voice actor portrays Emperor Nefarious is just excellent. My favorite character of all the Ratchet and Clank games is Emperor Nefarious. The acting that Emperor Nefarious gives off is just so good. I absolutely love the performance of that character through the entire half of the game. The latter half of the game, when Emperor Nefarious appears, is just really good. That probably is one of the main reasons I continue to finish that game to the very end, because it's done extremely well. I just seeing Dr. Nefarious being thrown around by Emperor Nefarious is funny. He literally just no matter what he does, he just can't do anything else, and it's really good. That really was a saving grace of Rift Apart. Overall, I do like the game, albeit it's a little short. For the price, for $70, I don't think it's worth that much. The game is really not that long. I actually posted recently about my playtime, how long it took me to beat Ratchet and Clank. Sony recently allowed you to see your wrap it up segment. So it's called the PlayStation wrap up, that you can actually see the games you played for 2021. And it happened to be that Ratchet and Clank only took me roughly getting every possible item in the game. I actually platinum Ratchet and Clank. It's actually possible to platinum that game in one playthrough, believe it or not. And it only racked up roughly 20 hours to 26 hours in between there. It may seem like that's plenty of lengthy gameplay, but it really isn't. It's mostly the fact that you're really just collecting every single item in the game. You probably could beat Ratchet and Clank straight through without doing all of the collectibles and the gold bolts and whatnot in roughly 13 hours. The game is really not that long if you take it for what it is, just on the base level of its story. So for $70 for a game that really isn't that long, I don't know if it's worth that much. But if you were to do every single thing in the game, I think it may make up for it. There isn't a lot of enemy variety in the game. The game literally has the same sort of enemies the entire game. And but the actual story, the level design, the characters themselves, and of course the antagonist performance from Emperor Nefarious really saved the game for me overall, and I absolutely did have a lot of fun playing it. The game really doesn't have any replay value, but if you take it for what it is, it's a good game. Not the best in the series. I think A Crack in Time holds that spot still in my eyes. But I did have a lot of fun with the game, and that's really all I got to say about the game. Had a lot of fun playing it, platinumed it, and it was a good game for the PlayStation 5, considering it was one of the earlier launch window games.
Cool.
I guess that took too long. Sorry, guys. I put y'all to sleep.
Huh.
I was trying to be short about it, so.
Well,
No, good.
There's nothing. There's nothing to comment. So.
Yeah, I mean, I only watched my brother play through it. I didn't play it myself, so I can't really comment on it myself. So.
I guess the next thing to talk about is Tales of Arise.
All right, and that's where I go to sleep. I'm kidding. I haven't actually played the game enough myself. I've only just played the very first level. I call it level because technically, there's the beginner area, and I got to like the second area of the game. But it's about as far as I played. So I will let these guys take the floor.
Okay. So what do you think of the game of Sword?
I personally I loved it, and I rank it definitely one of my favorite Tales games. I think that if I'm looking back at all the Tales games that I've beaten, which is a lot of them, I think I'd probably rank Arise like third place, with Abyss being my favorite, and then Berseria being the second place. I really enjoyed it. I thought it had a really well-told story. I really enjoyed the themes that it tackled. The cast, I don't think that the cast is as strong as some other Tales games, but I do like this cast for the most part. And combat-wise, I think it's also one of the best in the series. Graphics look great, and it's just an overall very great game all around. It really doesn't do too much wrong. I just really enjoyed it from start to finish.
I would say, like, in terms of the cast, I do think it's in the upper tier, but it's not as strong as Berseria. It's cast.
Yeah, Berseria and definitely has like one of the absolute best casts in the whole entire series.
Yeah, overall, I would say I have around the same assessment as Sword. It's in my top 5, probably around the same ranking as Sword, now that I think about it. Firstly, I think what they did with the combat engine is something to praise them. Especially since they're using different combat engine than in the past 4 Tales games we've been.
Yeah, and that engine is not not great. So after slogging through it for so many games, having Arise look the way it does, and honestly, Arise is a very beautiful looking game, especially the environments. I think it's a great looking game. One of my favorite environments though is Menancia. I think that the grassy plains that they put you in definitely gave me some very heavy Xenoblade vibes, and I think it just looked really gorgeous.
I gotta just say this: play Arise, and then go back and play Xillia, and you would appreciate the advancement in gaming technology.
I mean, I feel like I could still play Xillia in regards to its combat system. It's still a
Yeah,
really fun game.
I think Xillia's combat is about on par with Arise, not better or worse, but on par.
Xillia 2 more than Xillia 1.
Yeah, more specifically.
But if you want gorgeous palette swap colors of environments, you would love that game.
Like, I think they did a really good job of making each main area of Arise feel distinctive and full of personality.
Yeah, like in terms of environments, like the Xillia games are very bland and just palette swaps of each other, and they're just not that fun to explore. Whereas everything in Arise, whether it be the fields, the dungeons, or the towns, everything has an identity, and it makes it more fun to go through.
But yeah, Calaglia, Slastoria, I think Menacia, Mahawksar, Ganatheros, and then eventually Rena. I think they each feel very distinctive with their own biomes and their own personality. And I do think that the game in the story does a really good job of highlighting how each story arc in these areas highlight a different form of oppression that the characters have to go through, and how that type of, I guess, emancipation, which is kind of weird because Persona 5 made themes around emancipation as well.
Funnily enough.
Yeah. But yeah, with Calagia is just basically the typical rebelling against them, about how they have these people basically in chains working the mines, that sort of stuff. But in Sasoria, you have the people like turning the denizens against each other in terms of rewarding people or punishing people who don't like rat out each other. Menacia is probably the most where it seems the most peaceful, at least on the surface. And Mahawksar is basically just a kind of role reversal in terms of the dynamics between Renans and Dynans, in terms of what happened to the Lord in that area when you first arrived there. And Gun of Heroes is just basically the ultimate subjugation of the ultimate form of oppression that you can do to a person. And then Rena is also a very nice, well, not on the Rena home planet itself, but on like the satellite planet. And then you see how.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no. I was just trying to remember what it was called.
Yeah.
The satellite. Rena. Yeah, Rena was the planet. I don't remember what it was called, but.
But yeah, I think the game does a really good job of making each story arc in Tales of Rise to feel impactful and meaningful, and how it tackles its themes of what it means to be free. Because that's like,
and it manages to weave like the story arcs into like the overarching story too.
Yeah.
Like everything feels like it has some kind of impact in what's going on.
And it does a good job of integrating each character's story arc into the main story as well. I enjoy the story and writing in Tales of Rise a lot, especially in retrospective, and see how it like flows. The only problem I have with the story is probably the actual ending of the game.
Yeah, like after the final boss.
Yeah, after
which
the
is
final boss.
a shame because I think that everything leading up to that was really good.
Yeah.
Like we got some really interesting plot reveals, some cool twists and turns, and leading up to that was really good. But then once you beat the final boss, everything just feels like it's over in the snap of a finger, and it just ends up feeling like really rushed, which was really disappointing.
Overall, I think the story is pretty good. We might elaborate more on Tales of Rise if we make a video dedicated to Tales of Rise at a later date, but for now, the story, I liked it. I thought it was pretty good. And the character dynamics is pretty great. And I think like Tales of Rise has the best character design of all the Tales games so far.
Yeah, I really like the art style and the designs of all the characters. They have very distinct looks, and I think that they do a good job of representing like the respective regions that they come from.
Combat. I think the combat in Tales of Rise is really, really good. It's funny because coming from Scarlet Nexus, you can see how they like had some influence from the combat system in Scarlet Nexus and put it in this.
Yeah, I haven't touched too much of Scarlet Nexus, so I can't really comment, but I did play a little bit of it, and I can see the resemblance.
Yeah, in regards to
boosts.
Yeah, like how to integrate boost strikes is really, really cool, because like in the game, there are two ways to down an enemy. One, reduce their enemies to their HP to 0. The other is building up their boost gauge to the point where if you build it up long enough, you can do a one-hit KO to them using boost strikes. Yeah, boost strikes, which is like this fancy, cool-ass animation where two characters do a dual attack to them. And they're really, really cool. And it really fits with Tales' combat system, since most of the Tales games' combat system is about linking attacks and doing elaborate and cool combos. Mostly with your own character, but also with your other party members, and having these elaborate and cool and long combos. And the boost strike mechanic perfectly emphasizes that. And I think boost attacks is also a really good mechanic too, as a way to not only extend your attack and give you more AP to use your attack, but also like as a way to make each character feel like they have a distinctive enemy type that they have a distinct advantage of, which will make you want to use the various party members throughout the game for fighting this particular type of enemy, or at least using their boost attacks. And then there's like the AP system, which is it's sort of like the CP system in Arise, where it would determine how many type of arts you can link with each other. With there's being normal attacks are back now, but you can only do 3 of it. 3 of them on the ground and 3 of them in the air. And which does give me to talk about how there's a lot more emphasis in aerial combat somewhat in this game, with how you have like initially 3 sets of arts you can use in the ground and 3 sets in the air. Though later on you can get expand to be able to use 6 type of arts on the ground and then 6 types of different arts in the air. And I think that's really cool as well. And how you can do some sick air ground to air combos back to ground combos.
Yeah, it's really satisfying to string together all these normal attacks with the arts and then launching them into the air and then slamming them back down. And then it's just there's a lot of creativity. There's a lot of creative freedom you can use to create some really cool combos, and it's really satisfying to pull them off and then end it with a really flashy boost strike.
And I do think each character, like they did a really great job of making each character feel so distinctive and fun to play as. Like with Alphen being your traditional sword user, with him having the ability to basically use the flaming sword as a charge attack, which can do a lot of damage if you charge it up. Well as it having, as well his boost attack having being the ability to down any enemy, but at the cost of his health. And then you have Xion, his guns and spells, who specializes in attacking aerial type enemies. And really have a lot of attacks specialized in long range attacks. And then you have Law, who is basically your berserker type, melee type of character, basically your monk, who gets strong the more you attack the enemy and the more you don't get hit. Rinwell is a really fun mage to play as, especially once you get used to her spell mechanics. Dohalim is basically your magic knight. Not as fun as Melia, but still pretty fun, especially once you utilize his dodge mechanic that makes his pole stronger, which is kind of like a Leia, but I think he's a more fully realized version of Leia. Did that make sense?
Yeah. Dohalim's like a great like mishmash of different
I think
like, fighting styles. He's
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's Kisara, who's probably one of the more unique characters, just because like every other character dodge is an actual dodge, well her dodge is actually guarding, which will get you to play her differently, just because guarding an attack is pretty different from dodging an attack. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. It's pretty it feels really different in this game when you're playing as Kisara. And she has a lot of heavy attacks. Her mace and shield moveset feels really satisfying and strong to pull off.
Once you get the hang of her, she's a lot of fun to play as.
Yeah.
I remember like playing as her in the Coliseum just to get the challenges done, and I really enjoyed playing as her. Once, especially like I was so used to dodging that it took a little while to get used to, because you know that's what kind of like what one of the mechanics game is built around. So when you play as a character who can't dodge, it's a little weird, but once you pull it off, then it's pretty satisfying.
Yeah. But overall, I think they did a really great job with the combat system in Tales of Arise, and I think the progression system is pretty good as well.
Yeah, it's basically a variation of the title system from Graces. Doesn't work identically, but it's similar, and like every title has its own set of skills, and what's nice is that certain titles are accumulated in different ways. Like a good amount of them are just unlocked through the story, but a lot of them you also get from side quests or like crafting certain items or whatever. You can get them in a variety of ways, and it's a good way to like really build your character the way you want to. And I think it's one of the better leveling systems in the Tales series.
Now for the music. I like it. I think it's pretty cool. I think most of the boss themes sounds really cool. And I think the field themes is pretty like for the most part is pretty nice as well.
Yeah, like for me the music is kind of there, but I will say that when it hits, it really hits.
Yeah.
Like I really enjoy like you said the boss themes too, and I really like the normal battle theme. It's really catchy, and I also like how in the final act they take that same exact battle theme but make a guitar variation of it, and it's like really it has a great like sense of progression. Like it makes the story feel like it's progressing when you have the battle theme change like that. So it's really cool. And
I think the cutscene music is also pretty good when it wants to be.
Yeah, like when it decides to make its presence known, then it hits. And I
Though-
also really like the Menancia field
Yeah.
map theme. Like that's such a really calming piece that I really love.
I will say there is one part of the game that feels so mismatched in terms of the music they use, and that's like the boat ride when you're in Mahasar.
Oh yeah, it's like so goofy sounding, and
Yeah.
and nothing goofy is even happening.
The only
in
goofy
the
thing,
cutscene.
the only goofy thing is Kasar getting boat sick. But
Yeah,
even then,
that's about it.
But even then, that's only for like the intro part of the her interaction on the boat ride. The rest is pretty
Pretty grounded.
Yeah.
And it doesn't exactly, at least it doesn't warrant goofy music though,
Yeah.
even despite all that.
Like we said, the character is good, but I think one more point to emphasize in terms of the character writing and story writing is that I think Tales of Rise has like the best romance so far in the Tales games in regards to like main character, main heroine being together. Because we sort of have that with Luke and Tyr, Jude and Emilia, but sort of for Emil and Marta. I think Alphen and Xion is probably the best take they had at a romantic subplot. At least to me.
Yeah, I think that it's a slow burn, but I think that's what makes the payoff of the relationship between Alphen and Xion like so much more satisfying when it actually does like finally take full shape. And the chemistry and banter between the two of them is so natural and organic, and I couldn't help but like just ship them.
Okay. Is there anything else to talk about Tales of Rise? At least like just from overview?
Not really, I don't think.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that's all. Overall, I think Tales of Rise is like it was just a game I enjoyed a lot in 2021. When we get down to it, it's probably my game of the year. And strangely enough,
It's
it
definitely
won.
up there for me.
It won
RPG
RPG of the year.
I never thought I would see the day. I would live to see the day where a Tales game wins RPG of the year. I never thought that would happen, but I lived to see it.
I know people ridicule Cyberpunk a lot, but I thought it might have won just because people have played Cyberpunk more than they have like SMT5 or Tales of Rise and stuff like that. So it was still a pleasant surprise.
Yeah.
Still think cruising that cruising game should have won Game of the Year. Cruising World should have won Game of the Year. That game was beast. I mean, how many games you know where you can fly around or drive a car as a shark?
I don't know.
Exactly.
I guess.
But you're right. You're right. Tales of Rise deserved Game of the Year.
It was RPG of the year.
I mean, sorry. It deserved to be RPG of the year.
If it was Game of the Year, then that would be really hype.
Okay, let's not forget the box set was pretty awesome too. I mean, that cool figure. So yeah.
I guess the next game we could talk about is like Lost Judgment.
Actually, it's funny enough because for me, Tales of Arise was my game of the year, and then when I played Lost Judgment, that for me it toppled it. Now, I will say I prefer the first Judgment personally, but I do really love Lost Judgment as well, and I think that the story does tackle some pretty heavy subject matter, and it goes in some like really dark directions that I feel like a lot of games don't even want to tread.
Now, before you guys dive into your game discussion of this game, I gotta ask Sword a question about the first game.
Shoot.
So you mentioned that you liked the first one a little more. Could you explain the reason for that?
I just prefer the story of the first one. I don't think it's better per se. I just think that the directions that the first Judgment goes in are really like shocking, and I didn't expect it. Like the way that it weaves these two seemingly separate plots to seamlessly together later on is just so like masterfully done, and it's one of the most like intelligently written detective stories I've seen in many years. And I don't mean that like as an exaggeration. I do genuinely mean that. It's a very extremely intelligently written story, and I just really loved all the revelations and the characters and the writing, and it's just it's honestly like about as close to perfection as you could possibly get. So
like essentially, if this was done in a live action movie, it could be pulled off.
Yeah, I don't see why I couldn't.
I will say
no,
that
just curious.
I would say that the first Judgment, also feels a lot more personal towards Yagami as a character, and his growth for the game. In Lost Judgment, he doesn't really go through much character growth like he does in the first game.
Yeah, because the thing is, I think like most of all of his character growth happened in the first game, so I guess from their perspective, they're like, well, there's really no other direction for him to go because all that his development happened already.
But like I feel like all the like main characters' development is like relegated in the first game.
Yeah.
Like Kaito,
like Sugiura.
Sugiura, yeah. But
you could almost say that if you don't play the first game, you really don't understand these characters well enough.
No, even though Lost Judgment tells its own self-contained story, it fully expects you to be familiar with the characters of the first game, because it does not hold your hand and it does not introduce you at all. Like, it's like, hey guys, here's the next game, and
But that's why
which is fine.
That's why I think First Judgment is better in terms of like character writing. I think it's better than Lost Judgment, as well as it doing a really good job of introducing a very intriguing detective story, as well as coming out with these interesting themes that the game tackles. The second game has an intriguing storyline, as well as interesting themes around bullying and long-term effects of it, and how it has
like suicide and things like that,
and how if something that affects that point in the past has such a ripple effect that it affects everybody else, so many people later on. And how you really need to think of your actions and that sort of stuff. I think the themes and story and subject matter that the second game tackles is interesting too. It's just that the character writing isn't as strong as the first game.
Yeah. Although I will say, I do feel like the I won't give away names, but like the ultimate mastermind in Lost Judgment is actually like a lot more sympathetic compared to like the first game's antagonist. Like, obviously what he's doing is morally wrong, but you can like see where he's coming from.
You get that sort of impression that the game gives you more mystery to try to solve all these things, right?
I think it's half and half between the two. I think they both do sufficient jobs like building up their mystery. The reveal of the killer's identity in Lost Judgment is revealed a lot earlier than that of like the mole in the first game, which is kind of like good and bad in a way. Like it's considering the fact it's revealed like maybe just barely halfway past the game is kind of like takes away the mystery. But the thing is, there's more mysteries to be solved in Lost Judgment past that. It's not just who done it. And plus, I think they wanted to take the time to develop that character and give you his perspective. So I guess it's kind of like half and half. Because in the first Judgment, you don't find out who the mole is until the very end of the game. So I think they both work well in their own respective ways.
But yeah, overall, I think the story in Lost Judgment is pretty good. Even though like the subject matter might not be to everybody's liking, just because it has to deal with high school and stuff. And people are like...
It handles it like in a mature way. It doesn't come off as like anime cringe or anything like that.
I know, but people might just get sick of high school stuff by now.
Yeah, in general.
Yeah.
Regardless of how it's executed, people are probably sick of like of Japan and their high schools.
Yeah.
Well, not to mention, it's Atlas and Persona.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean, let's be honest. When you think Sega, you think Persona. Well, no, the fact too the fact they went to the school kind of surprised me because we're talking about a Yakuza game in a sense, you know, like the environment of a school and that sort of setting. How would that even work? But surprisingly enough, I gotta say, the more I played into it and saw all the different things that Yagami can interact with the school, try to fit in and blend it as he's investigating, that was pretty actually interesting to me. In a comedic sort of way, they pulled it off. I was a little bit surprised by that.
What do you think of the school stories?
I didn't delve too much into them, but the ones I did, they were charming.
My favorite is the one where you do the whole motorcycle thing. I thought that was interesting.
Oh my god, the motorcycle mini game.
Yeah, it's fucking hard as shit, especially the last stage.
You know, difficulty actually, the difficulty you pick actually affects how hard it is.
Yeah, oh, it does?
Yep.
Is it really?
Mm-hmm.
Because I actually tried. I didn't know this now that you mentioned it, but I wonder what it's like on hardest difficulty then.
It's pretty miserable. No, well, most of the motorcycle battles aren't half bad. It's when you get to the last one where it's like it just feels like hell.
Yeah, the last stage. Oh my god. You want to like pull your hair out, dude. Literally.
Okay.
No walk in the park.
If I were to rank the school story, dancing club probably up there. Robotics club, it is interesting, but the robotics battle minigame is kind of eh.
Well, not only that, but you're required to go out and sort of farm for money because you have to actually
build the parts.
Build up your and it's not like you can just progress that area or that part of the school club without actually doing that. So it's sort of weighs down the progression of that specific class or that specific aspect of school.
Yeah. The boxing club is pretty cool, even though
I have to say
it's kind of wacky how a teenager is as strong as the teenager they investigate in the boxing club storyline, but it's Yakuza, so
you gotta kind of have a little bit of suspension.
Here's what makes the boxing club the most important thing about that game, because once you complete it, you get a new fighting stance, and it is so overpowered to the point you can juggle everybody in the air infinitely, and you can basically kill them with them ever touching the ground from the rest of the game onward. To the point it just makes the game weak. It's crazy.
Then there's the biker gang. That's has a rather interesting story. Though the biking minigame, it can be very exhausting, especially at the end.
Speaking of these mini games, this is what I like about Lost Judgment, because it gave me a flashback to Yakuza 5, where I just felt this stuff was just shoehorned into each character to make them have some sort of, I guess, uniqueness to their gameplay aspect. Whereas I feel this game gave you choice to, if you want to do these, this is an optional thing, but there's a reward to each. And they made it feel like they took the research and time to make them feel different. That's actually what I liked about the little class aspects of those games, of the school aspect. Because when you want to take a break from the main story, you have this sort of option. But not just the fact that you have the clubs, but there's actually a story attached to the clubs. Like there's a purpose to you doing the clubs. It isn't just because you're doing them just since you're doing them. There is a purpose to it. There's a end goal. You know, I like that about that.
Then there's the photography club, which is whatever. Same thing for the skaters.
I didn't really feel like that was any. I didn't really like the photography club.
Especially the same thing for the skaters club. The esports
I
club
like
is
that.
just the esports club is just trash.
I like that a little more than
Yeah.
the photography club. But they ain't saying much.
Yeah, but esports club is just trash, man. It just free
Yeah,
short
it's
fights.
literally 3 short fights, and
Three short,
that's it.
very easy virtual 5 fights, and basically just a very weak storyline.
And matter of fact, I almost like they threw that in because you remember there was a fighting game Yakuza, and it sort of reminded me of a what if scenario, which on a very low scale,
Yeah, but it's just using Virtual Fighter 5. You just have
which is also really stupid because you
one.
could go play Virtual Fighter 5 in the arcade in the game. So what's the point?
And then there's Casino. It's just it's just a throwaway case, okay? And then the girls' club. It's interesting because it's the usual Yakuza hangout, the girls hangout type of mechanic that most Yakuza games have, so it probably feel pretty familiar. But besides that, it has some nice interactions with each of the girls, but that's basically it. And then like the mystery club is just basically the overarching storyline revolving around these school clubs, and I think it's pretty cool. Once you've done all those, when you've done all the clubs, and see the main storyline revolving around the professor and stuff like that. I will say that even though I like some of these school stories, I will say that since most of the sub stories in the game I feel is based on school stories, there's not as much variety of sub stories in Lost Judgment as compared to other Yakuza games or even Judgment.
It really isn't, and I think that has a lot to do with the fact you're in a whole new city, like where in the other game you're mostly in Kamurocho. There was the sort of the idea that they had all of this sort of the area built to have more of the variety, where there's this whole new area that they didn't really have anything built from the ground up to allow variety in the environment that they were in. I guess the school sort of was their way of fixing that idea. Now, don't get me wrong, I think the clubs were cool. You know what I'm saying? Like, imagine Persona having clubs like that, more involving than like say, like this game was. That would be pretty dope, you know. But I do, at the end of the day, think that it still was cool just to see how they took something that you wouldn't have think would be fun and made it actually pretty interesting.
Anything more to add to Lost Judgment, Sword?
I don't think so, to be honest. I mean, the gameplay is almost exactly the same as the first one, so I don't really know if there's much to cover there, really.
I feel the gameplay has the same issues as the first game does.
Yeah.
In that they're like in Judgment and in Lost Judgment, there are fighting styles that the game introduces. 2 in Judgment, and 3 in this game. Because it's just using the 2 it did before and just introducing one more fighting style. But I feel like the game doesn't really do a good job balancing each fighting style well. Because like there's like in Lost Judgment, there is no reason to not use Tiger over Crane.
I always thought that was a weak fighting stance.
Yeah. And in this game, there's like pretty much no reason to not use like the new fighting style, especially when you're fighting bosses.
Oh, it's overpowered. I would use it every time.
Yeah. At least that's how I feel. Like the only reason, the only reason you might want to use it is what in a boss battle is just for heat action, just because using the same heat actions has diminishing returns in this game, like the other Yakuza games. So yeah.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why if you're going to try to unlock every fighting stance, doing that fight club, doing that club where you're fighting, it's sort of like recommended, or so you can get that new fighting stance, because it just makes the game. If you want to breeze through the game, that's like recommend it, but honestly, there is really no difference between both games in that sense. Sort of more the same. Not anything wrong with that now. I'm not saying that it's bad, but I feel like that I'm hoping that if they do a new game, that they add some more variety to the combat to make it better.
But yeah, like the combat is pretty good, but I wouldn't say it's like the most amazing combat system I've played. But I think it still does it does its job pretty well.
Yeah, it's fine. It's still enjoyable, and the heat actions are
Yeah.
fun to watch, and it's got all the Yakuza staples, and it gets you by.
Yeah. I think that's it for Last Judgment.
Hmm.
Uh, I guess we have time for one more game. Do you have any other
Yeah.
game you want to talk about for us?
Um, well, I'll be brief.
Okay.
So the other game I talk about just very briefly, I don't want to make it long, is Guardians of the Galaxy. Um, it's one game that I know that's not normally what we talk about, but I have to mention it because it came out at a time when Marvel's Avengers was poorly rated. It was not well received by Square Enix when they published it. That game had a lot of microtransactions involved in it, so quite naturally, Guardians of the Galaxy was just not well received when it was initially announced to be coming out. They showed a trailer of it. I remember absolutely liking what I saw of the gameplay, but a lot of people didn't think it was going to be all that great. Well, I bought it, and I was pleasantly surprised with it. It's a really good game. It follows the story of all the cast from the Guardians of the Galaxy universe, especially the fact that it makes up its own story specifically for the game. And it really is a bar none one of the most enjoyable experiences I've ever had. The characters, the writing, the the overall story is just superb. All the characters banter throughout the world, um, throughout the different planets you visit, even in the when they're in their aircraft in outer space during their intermission between new worlds, they're building relationships. Um, Gamora specifically has a cool thing, Easter egg essentially, where you determine she actually collects different things, and when you find out, she gets embarrassed by it because she sort of has this sort of toughness to her personality. She's like considered very dangerous individual to be around because of her aura being involved with one of the antagonists in the storyline. And it's just a great game. Rocket is really cool. He talks about his backstory and it's written very well. Um, it's just and of course let's not forget Peter Quill as well, who is the main character. You get to see more of his childhood and his parents and understanding where he came from on Earth and the situation he ended up in Guardians of the Galaxy. It's a really good game. Honestly, the writing was it's one of the best highlights of it. And the combat is where the game kind of falls a little short. Not that it's not bad or anything, but it definitely leaves much to be desired in terms of that because Peter Quill doesn't really have a lot of different moves. You end up feeling like the game is just sort of a little bit repetitive at times. But what they do to try to make it different is that each of the characters uh, plays differently, and you can command them when need be because you don't really control them, but you sort of give them commands to do special abilities that they're equipped to do. And throughout the different stages, you fight different enemies for each world. You fight cool, unique bosses who are actually characters from the actual universe of Guardians of the Galaxy. Different iterations of some of those bosses, some of those enemies, and of course antagonists from those previous comics and movies make an appearance. And it's just a great game, full of fun, Combat is pretty basic, but it keeps the game going. It flows naturally. You are able to do customize characters' costumes by collecting them throughout the worlds, and above all else, I think I really came to the conclusion towards the end of the game that I took a risk, and I feel like I was rewarded with something special. Guardians of the Galaxy is my game of the year. I absolutely had a blast with that game. It was it was just a great game. And if you find a game for cheap, it's definitely worth a pickup. I do recommend it. Absolutely. If you can overlook some of the gameplay flaws, for what it's worth, it does the job. It's not like you're going to get bored of the game, but it does a good job of that. And one last thing I'll add to this before I finish, you do have the option to have some replay value with the game. There are two segments in the game that gives you choice to how you determine how it affects the story later on. And one of the areas you can stealthily go through the whole planet of a certain section of the game without fighting a single enemy, and you can go um, all into the fight if you want to. There's a choice, and there's actually outcomes to those decisions. There's different cutscenes to those decisions, and there's another decision you can make that actually adversely affect um, the ending of the story too. Or I think it's midway through. But besides that, absolute fun with Guardians of the Galaxy. And that's pretty much it for me on that specific game. And back to Peter.
Well, I think that's most of the game that are our highlights. I think. Is it?
I think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Most of the other games, like we talked about before in the beginning of the video here, is we just didn't have the opportunity to finish a lot of them. And that's just understandable. When there's so many games coming out, it's just hard to keep up with all of
I
them.
mean, I finished the games I talked about, but
No, I mean even
yeah.
games that we might have had dabbled to other
Yeah.
than the ones we talked about. Like
But
just so many.
yeah. But I'll probably save those. Talk about those games later on, especially Xenosaga, since next episode is probably gonna be a Xenosaga.
Yeah, because since you played Xenosaga 3, honestly, like Xenosaga is such like an in-depth series that you might as well just make one dedicated to the whole trilogy.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's all for today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and well, this is Peter for 7890 Sasarus signing off.
Later. Have a good one.
All right, peace, everyone.